Have you ever wondered what someone thinks in the last seconds of their life? Not the silent routine of death, but the whirlwind that consumes the mind, the crushing truth no one else will ever hear. He stood there on death row, eyes fixed on a point perhaps only he could see. His heavy breathing mingled with the icy silence, each step of the jailer echoing like a final sentence. "I didn't do it," he said, and for a moment the world seemed to tremble. It wasn't just a sentence. It was a suppressed scream, a plea for justice, or perhaps just a confession that would come too late. Do you feel it? The urgency to be heard, to prove innocence when time has already run out. The corridor seemed to stretch on forever. The cold, white walls reflected an echo that belonged to no one, as if the very ghosts of those stones bore witness to injustice. Every detail was meticulously controlled. The impeccable uniform, the door that closed with surgical precision, the silent presence of observers who became almost shadows. And at the center of it all, he, alone and vulnerable, the last barrier between what is known and what is hidden. Have you ever felt that vertigo? The sensation of being face to face with something that shouldn't exist, but is somehow absolutely real? The blame isn't solely his. Perhaps you feel it now as you imagine yourself in his shoes. What would you do if all the evidence pointed against you, even if the truth were different? Every detail that went unnoticed, every averted glance, every complicit silence, it all piled up in that moment. And that's where the true terror begins. The human mind faced with the unknown, the conscience confronting the inevitability of being judged, condemned, forgotten. Do you realize how easy it is to get lost in this thought, how empathy itself becomes a prison? No one knows for sure what happened in those final minutes. There are rumors, fragments of testimony, echoes of a mystery that grows deeper every day. Some say he left clues, small statements that no one appreciated in time. Other voices assert that even in those final words, there was something deeper, a shadow of revelation that could change everything. And that's exactly what we're going to explore. What he didn't say, what was hidden, what the world must never forget. What you'll discover now may surprise you and perhaps even disturb you. The corridor doesn't end, and neither does the truth. His every gesture, every hesitation, every word spoken, carries layers of history, suffering, and secrets that can only be felt, never fully understood. There's an invisible tension, a fine line between fear and curiosity, between pain and empathy. Can you sense it? The feeling of being the confidant of something forbidden, of having access to a moment that should never be witnessed. It's this vertigo that holds you back, that doesn't let you breathe, that forces you to look more closely even when it hurts. And while the echo of that last breath still lingers in the air, a question arises and remains: did he really not do it? Or is the unheard confession just part of something larger, hidden, waiting to be revealed? This is where we let the initial shock settle, and begin to delve into what happened before that last sentence, before the final sentence, before the world realizes that some truths are more disturbing than death itself. The corridor closes behind him, but the story doesn't end there. What lies ahead is deeper, darker. And you, who have already become complicit in this silent revelation, need to prepare yourself. Because what comes next isn't just about one man or one crime. It's about what the human mind holds when faced with the impossible. While you still feel the echo of that last sentence, the chill running down your spine, realize something. This story isn't just about him. It's about you too, about the curiosity that drives you, about the safe fear that keeps you stuck, glued to the screen. You allowed yourself to dive in, to peek into the forbidden, to feel the tension you'd never admit aloud. And that's exactly why we need to stay together. If you feel this restlessness, this need to understand what no one wants to see, then do more than just watch. Subscribe. Not as an obligation, but as a silent pact between those who seek the truth and those who decide to reveal it. Each subscription here is not just a number. It's a promise that you will have access to the layers that are still hidden, to the secrets that wait in the shadows. It's their way of saying, I want to know. I want to feel. I want to look where few dare. And the truth is, these stories never stop. Every video, every account, every fragment of dark memory we share is constructed so you can feel the weight, the pain, and the mystery, but also so you can find companionship in this darkness. Here you are not alone. There is a community that breathes together, that questions together, that hesitates together. And together we will continue to descend ever deeper, exploring what hides behind closed doors, silent corridors, and whispers no one else dares to hear. So do it. Subscribe. Activate the bell. Become part of this quest that is as personal as it is universal. Each story we reveal is a chance to understand what scares us, to confront mortality, to look at the limits of the human mind and ask, what if it were me? It is here, in this dark territory, that you find partial answers, fragments of truth, and the thrill of knowing that the unknown always lurks just out there, just out of reach, yet as close as your own breath. And when you subscribe, when you become part of this silent circle, each subsequent video will carry more weight. Every detail will come to life, every shadow will have meaning. Because what comes next isn't just a continuation. It's the revelation that everything you thought you knew was only the surface. There's more, always more, waiting between the lines, behind locked doors, in secrets that haven't yet dared to be told. Don't miss this. Don't turn away now. Stay, see, feel. And remember, every subscription here isn't just a click. It's a choice to be present, to not settle for easy answers, to remain in this space where safe fear meets curiosity, and where darkness reveals what the world insists on hiding. Because the story isn't over yet. And you, now a silent accomplice, will see that the next step is much deeper than anyone could have imagined. He was breathing heavily, but no one seemed to hear. The silence in the room was almost palpable, broken only by the electric hum of the cold lights above death row. He didn't know that all eyes were fixed on him. Not just the officers, not just the guards. The whole world seemed to have condensed in that moment, compressed into seconds that dragged by, dense, heavy, each second carrying the possibility of a truth no one was prepared to confront. What would you feel if you were there? If you could hear not just the words, but the emptiness they carried? He said, "I didn't do it," and those words weren't just a denial. They were a silent scream, a whisper from a mind torn between guilt, injustice, memory, and something deeper, a secret that wouldn't fully reveal itself. You feel it too, don't you? A twinge of doubt, an uneasiness that grows beyond your control. Authorities later described it all as standard procedure. Cold, bureaucratic. But they couldn't erase the impact of a hesitation, a pause that lasted too long. A gaze that seemed to cross the room, cross every body present, as if he were contemplating something no one else could see. What was he looking at? Did he see the future? Or the past? Or just the hole he would leave in the world after it was all over? This is the first contradiction. The official version of the event is linear, rational, almost anesthetized. But he, in that moment, tore apart the order, shattered the narrative everyone was waiting to hear. There's something hypnotic about the way the mind reacts to extremes, to the imminence of death, to the feeling that time is simultaneously infinite and scarce. He relived decisions, fragments of life, memories of mistakes and successes that blended into a whirlwind invisible to the observer. Every detail carried weight, every gesture carried an entire story of transformation and mentality. He knew he was about to enter a reality no one else would experience in the same way. And there, in the hallway before the final impact, secrets began to subtly emerge. The hidden truth of poor choices, the revelation of intentions lost to the perception of others, the psychological impact of a crime not only committed but lived over and over again in thought, in regret, in fear. Have you ever felt it? The tension that comes when someone before you holds a truth that could change everything? He did. And it's this feeling that permeates every second before a fate is sealed. The safe fear you feel as a spectator is addictive because it allows you to lurk without risking yourself, without paying the full price. But he pays. He pays with his breath, with his racing heart, with the awareness that every second counts, every memory doubles, every detail takes on meaning. And yet, he finds room to manipulate the perception of those around him. A look that doesn't match denial. A slight tremor in his fingers, the way his voice, still firm, lets slip a nuance that contradicts the official narrative. And it's at this point that the mystery deepens. Some seemingly small details, a pause, an involuntary gesture, a mentally repeated phrase, can completely alter one's perception of what actually happened. Have you ever noticed how the human mind becomes a trap for itself under extreme pressure? He knew this. Every thought, every regret, every fragment of memory that flashed by seemed to obey its own, almost cruel logic. Its reality and interpretation intermingling, blurring the line between what happened and what he felt happened. A distortion that makes it impossible to look at the event from the outside without feeling the same weight he carried. Death row isn't just a physical space. It's a state of mind. A laboratory of extreme decisions, of intimate confrontations, of hidden truths being dragged to the surface. And while everyone waited for a simple execution, something deeper unfolded. An unsolicited analysis of life, a silent dissection of what makes us human, vulnerable, and at the same time frighteningly aware of our own limits. He stared into the void, and in that moment, it seemed the void was staring back. False clues emerge like shadows, almost imperceptible but present. A gesture that seems innocent, a phrase that sounds routine but carries layers of meaning. Every bystander, every officer, every detail in the hallway could be interpreted in multiple ways. And the doubt is intentional. It keeps you, the onlooker, tense, questioning, looking inward and asking yourself, what if it were me? How would I react? Psychological voyeurism is inevitable. You become complicit in a mind teetering on the brink. But empathy grows too. Because even in the darkness, even in the face of a seemingly monstrous crime, you recognize humanity. He was breathing more slowly now. Not out of fear but out of calculation. Every second carried decisions you would never see, behind-the-scenes details that would never be documented, and yet they impacted everything around them. The tension, the impact, the internal transformations that occurred silently, constructed an invisible narrative, one that only those who observed closely could sense. Every gesture, every pause, every glance was a silent revelation, not of guilt or innocence but of complexity, of hidden truth, of pain that cannot be measured. And you realize that what appears to be an execution is merely a surface. That there's a whole layer of psychology, regret, conscience, and mystery that's never officially revealed. And it's there, at this threshold between what was seen and what was felt, that it leaves us on the brink of something deeper. What follows won't just be a crime story. It will be a dive into the human mind, into the decisions, the failures, the lies we tell ourselves, into what we hide even from those who trust us most. And as he stares into the void, you feel the same chill. A chill that never ceases, that can't be fully explained but that grips you. That compels you to continue, to observe, to question. The next step is already forming, almost imperceptibly behind the scenes, between the lines, in what he hasn't said, but which your mind begins to fill with images, sensations, doubts. Because the complete truth hasn't yet emerged. It hides, fragmented, waiting to be discovered. And it's in that moment that you realize there's no turning back. His mind, the hallway, the psychological impact, the contradictions. Everything intertwines in a state of tension you feel in your own skin, even sitting in silence. The whisper of the forbidden, the shiver of doubt, the weight of what's not officially told, all create a space where you understand. There's so much more than meets the eye. So much more that can be heard. So much more that can be explained. And so, without warning, without closure, the narrative curves gently, as if inviting you to move forward. Because what he felt before the execution is only the first layer of a story yet to be revealed, a hidden truth, a mystery that defies understanding and the very perception of what we consider real. Voices began to gather like shadows in the silent corridor. A murmur of footsteps, a door creaking, the barely audible whisper of guards discreetly trying to capture every detail. Witness accounts began to emerge, small, disconnected fragments. A look that lingered too long, a pause no one was supposed to notice, a tension that seemed to seep through the cold prison walls. Each detail was a clue, but none of them formed a complete picture. And that's where the whisper becomes theory. What you're about to perceive may seem simple, but it's a labyrinth. Every loose word, every interrupted sentence, combines in ways that confuse, intrigue, and provoke. The reporter backstage noticed first. He scribbled on a crumpled sheet of paper, his hands trembling, his eyes fixed on something that seemed to elude everyone else. He seemed to know something no one else did, he said softly, almost to himself, but the sound cut through the room like a cold blade. And you sense it even from a distance. There's a hidden truth, hidden beneath layers of silence and denial. Witnesses speak, but each account contradicts the last. A guard mentions a gesture, a slight furrowing of the brow, a barely perceptible movement of his right hand. Another, a reporter, describes his gaze, which seemed to seek something beyond what the eye could see. And so, the mosaic begins to form, but incompletely, broken, fragmented. Each piece rings true, but when put together, it defies logic and perception. He stood there, still breathing, but his breath carried something more than oxygen. It carried anxiety, regret, perhaps an incalculable fear. Have you ever felt the sensation of looking at someone and realizing you're faced with a complexity that won't be fully revealed? That some layers will remain hidden, even when the surface is exposed. He felt this too, and perhaps even more intensely. Every thought before the execution wasn't just about survival or guilt, but about how the mind itself transforms reality into perception, and perception into a kind of silent punishment. The first theories then emerge, almost like echoes from a parallel world. Some say he knew exactly what would happen, that he anticipated the impact of his actions and the repercussions behind the scenes. Others claim there was confusion, a distortion of memory itself, transforming a crime into an impossible-to-solve puzzle. Each version is valid and none is definitive. And you feel this tension growing, almost as if you could touch the invisible thread that connects thought, action, and consequence. Psychological voyeurism intensifies. Empathy mixes with fear and you wonder, how would I react if I were there? What would I reveal and what would I keep forever? The corridors seemed to expand and contract depending on the angle from which one looked. Voices overlapped, creating layers that defied perception. A sentence that should have been simple became an enigma. A gesture that seemed banal, a sign of nervousness, became a hint of something deeper, a silent revelation that went unnoticed by most, but not by those observing closely. Each witness, conscious or not, participated in an invisible choreography, shaping the theory that could not yet be confirmed. And he, at the center of it all, remained still but not static. Every micro-expression was a decision, every pause a choice. Mindset and emotion intertwined, and you realize that execution is not just physical but psychological. The impact of a crime, or the accusation of a crime, reverberates in ways that reality doesn't register. He was experiencing a silent transformation, and this transformation wasn't visible to everyone, but it could be felt by those who dared to look deeper. You feel the growing curiosity, don't you? An almost irresistible urge to connect the dots, to fill in the blanks he left. But it's impossible because he doesn't give everything away. And perhaps he never will. This is where the controversy begins. The truth everyone expected to see clearly conflicts with each witness's individual perception. Each account is a fragment of a puzzle that cannot be completed. And the condemned man's mind, before execution, remains a fortress of doubts, fears, regrets, silent strategies, and irreversible decisions. He looks around once more. A gaze that seems to span time, weighing heavily on every being present. An almost imperceptible gesture, but one that completely changes the interpretation of everything said so far. The whisper that began as denial becomes theory, a constantly shifting story where each spectator, each voice, each detail contributes to an incomplete picture. The hidden truth, the fragmented revelations, the psychological impact, all intertwined in layers that you sense but cannot fully decipher. And you realize in that instant that you're trapped with him. Not physically but mentally. Tension, pain, guilt, and curiosity form a web that envelopes everyone present and you on the other side of the screen, as if you were an accomplice to a mind on the brink of the abyss. Every decision, every gesture, every unspoken word reverberates in your consciousness, prompting reflection. What if it were me? What truths would I not reveal? What secrets would I take with me? And so the corridor remains, silent and paradoxically vibrant. Each fragment of testimony, each micro-gesture, each silence fills the space with mystery and controversy, preparing the mind for the next level of revelations. The theory forms but remains incomplete. And it is at this point that the viewer understands that the narrative doesn't end with what is seen or said. It continues behind the scenes, in the internal transformation, in the mindset that is shaped by the imminent unknown, waiting for the next layer of the story to emerge. The paper lay there, forgotten in a corner of the cell, almost camouflaged by dust and time. A fragment of existence that no one should have noticed, but which silently screamed its own relevance. The dim light of the corridor fell upon it in an almost theatrical way, as if the prison itself wanted someone to finally look. Whoever found the paper hesitated for a moment, hands suspended in the air, feeling the weight of something that transcended the materiality of the object. A detail insignificant to the outside world but charged with impact, with hidden truth. And you feel it too, even from a distance. There is something that should not be revealed but demands to be understood. The paper was crumpled, covered in pressure marks, jumbled scribbles, sentences interrupted mid-sentence, words that seemed to have been ripped from a mind on the verge of collapse. Each letter seemed charged with a tension that permeated the paper, reaching straight into the perception of anyone who dared to look. Have you ever felt a silent anxiety when you realize that a seemingly small detail can change everything you thought you knew? That's exactly what's happening now. The materiality of discovery merges with perception, and the mind of the condemned seems to whisper through the ink, the folds, and the gaps. There's something unsettling about it. A message? A trace left by a sheer need to be understood? Or merely a reflection of a mind fragmenting, trying to bring order to an internal chaos no one else could comprehend? The truth hides between the lines, between poorly digested thoughts and irreversible decisions, and you realize that every gesture, every trait, carries a weight that transcends logic. Behind the scenes of a mind in transformation, echoes of a mindset that lived under extreme stress, decisions that were made and still reverberate, and a silent impact that spreads to all who come near. The mark on the wall, so discreet, almost unnoticed, seemed to point to something beyond the paper. Perhaps it was just a reflection of an automatic action, an unintentional gesture. Or perhaps it was a deliberate clue, left as a warning for anyone who cared to see. And now you feel this duality. Doubt creeps in, silent and persistent, leaving a feeling of psychological voyeurism. Looking, understanding, perceiving, and yet still not being sure what it all means. Fear mixes with empathy and you ask yourself, what did he want to tell me? What truth remains hidden? Every physical detail is fraught with interpretation. An object, a mark, an incomplete sentence. Everything becomes a symbol, a provocation. You feel the condemned man's mind there, within those walls, breathing every nuance of fear, regret, and anticipation. Every physical gesture carries a meaning that only he could fully understand. But the perception of others, of guards, visitors, even the viewer himself, transforms these discoveries into an incomplete mosaic, a psychological puzzle where each piece is important, but none fully solves the puzzle. And, touching the paper, noticing the mark, you almost feel the weight of the decision he made seconds before execution. Transformation, guilt, regret, everything merges and the impact reverberates silently. Each handwritten line is a testimony, a fragment of truth trying to escape the mind, cross time, and reach someone who can understand. But the understanding is partial, fragmented, and you find yourself in a state of tension, anxious, curious, unable to let go of what has begun to reveal itself. Doubt grows. The paper, the mark, the silence of the cell, everything is a provocation that defies understanding. From the outside, one might think it trivial, but those who perceive the layers understand that there is a living, breathing story hidden within seemingly simple objects and gestures. What you will discover next is not just about the crime, nor the execution, but about how a mind reacts to the extreme, how it transforms fear into action, silence into a message, regret into clues that defy all logic. And as you absorb every detail, every fragment of physical evidence, the realization that nothing is obvious intensifies. The mystery deepens, the controversy settles silently. Every gesture, every mark, every incomplete word carries an impact that transcends materiality and directly touches the psychology, mindset, and transformation that takes place behind the scenes of a story that has yet to fully unfold. The line between reality and interpretation becomes blurred, almost imperceptible, and you feel like you're traversing a territory where only extreme attention reveals something true. And so, the paper remains there, the mark remains, the cell maintains its profound silence, and the mind that produced them becomes a living, breathing, fragmented narrative, challenging every perception, every judgment, every certainty. The physical fragment gives way to a new layer of suspense, silently preparing the next revelation, without ever giving away everything at once, allowing the viewer to feel the weight of the incomplete truth, the growing doubt, the psychological voyeurism that surrounds every detail, every gesture, every shadow that hovers in that space. And as you observe each detail, you feel something growing in the air, almost palpable. As if the silence of the cell yearns for someone to finally answer for him, for someone to look beyond the obvious and perceive the depth of what was left behind. You realize you're not alone in this feeling. Others have also tried to understand, question, and seek answers. But what about you? What do you feel when faced with this incomplete truth, this fragment of a mind that was on the verge of its end? If there's anything you can do right now, it's let your voice be heard. No need for long essays or complex explanations, just a word, a gesture, a fragment of what's going on inside you. Write in the comments what this awakens. It could be guilt, it could be fear, it could be injustice. It doesn't matter what form it takes, what matters is that you allow this feeling to exist outside of you. Each comment is proof that someone felt it, that someone noticed it, that someone dared to cross the wall of silence with me. By writing, you're not just participating, you're stepping behind the scenes of this story, becoming part of the same network of silent observers trying to understand the unspeakable. It's a small gesture but one loaded with meaning, a way to transform the pain you feel into something concrete, to give weight to your own perception. And that's precisely what keeps this narrative alive, allowing more layers of what happened to be explored, felt, and uncovered. As you type, you also create space for yourself. To feel, to question, to confront what you may never fully understand. Because every fragment of emotion you share in the comments becomes a bridge that connects your experience to others, that keeps the mystery pulsing, that makes the feeling of psychological voyeurism even more intense. It's a way of saying, I'm here, I felt this, I can't let it go. And even if no one responds directly, you know that gesture matters. Every word typed in the comments is an echo in the silent corridor of a mind that's gone, but still insists on speaking through traces, marks, and fragments. It's a silent outburst, an invisible pact between the observer and those watching along. A reminder that the story continues, that every detail still pulses, that every revelation still awaits unfolding. So take a deep breath and write. Choose a word that sums up what you feel. Transform your uneasiness into presence, your fear into a symbolic gesture, your empathy into a mark that crosses the screen and touches something beyond the obvious. Because in a way, each comment is a small confession, an emotional surrender that keeps alive the web of mysteries and hidden truths we're exploring together. And as your words take shape, the cell corridor remains silent yet vibrant. The paper, the mark, the mind that left it all, everything remains latent, waiting for someone to perceive the next layer, feel the next impact. The story moves in waves, fragmented, silent, yet intense. And you now are not just a spectator. You are a confidant, a witness, a living part of this labyrinth of secrets, and the next revelation is about to emerge from the silence. The paper was crumpled, hidden in the cracks of the wall, as if placed there by someone who knew no one would look closely. The scribbles made no sense at first glance. Disjointed letters, symbols that seemed to dance between the familiar and the absurd. But there was something there. A hidden pattern, an intention, a coded message. The viewer's mind began to spin in circles, trying to fill in the gaps, trying to imagine what he meant before it was all over. You realize the weight of the moment. It's not just a piece of paper. It's a direct bridge to the mind of someone who lived, suffered, and decided to leave traces that defy all logic. Every unfinished word, every crooked line, seemed to carry the energy of decisions never explained, of hidden truths that refused to appear complete. And it's at that moment that you feel a chill, not from fear of the physical, but from the silent approach of something that shouldn't be seen. Curiosity throbs intense and you ask yourself, what did he want to tell me? What was hidden behind what I never heard? Stay with me until the end. Not just because there are more details, more layers, more fragments, but because each small revelation will now be rewarded with understanding, with the feeling of penetrating the backstage of the human mind, of feeling the impact of choices that shape destinies. Every second you observe, every detail you perceive, is a piece that fits into this psychological puzzle. And if you step away, you will lose the depth, you will lose the intensity, you will lose the silent echo that still pulses in the cell. As you watch, it's impossible not to feel an almost physical connection with him. That safe fear, that empathy you didn't know you could feel for someone you've never met, begins to grow. You imagine your own mind in the final seconds of an endless confinement, trying to leave a trace, a last attempt to tell something the world didn't want to hear. And then the question arises, is what you're about to discover the truth, or just another carefully manipulated fragment, designed to confuse, to test your perception, to play with the line between reality and interpretation? Every symbol, every incomplete word raises more questions than answers. A subtle but powerful psychological blow that transforms curiosity into tension, observation into introspection. You realize you're intimately involved, no longer a passive spectator. Stay with me until the end. Feel the weight of it. Every detail that follows will be an invitation to look deeper, to question everything that seems obvious, to confront the discomfort of a mind in tatters. And as you absorb each stroke, each mark left on the edges of the paper, the story fragments and multiplies. What seemed simple becomes complex. What seemed linear becomes tangled in knots of possibilities and suspicions. The paper now is not just a physical object. It is the connecting thread of future revelations, a portal to decisions, thoughts, and impulses that previously remained invisible. It's impossible not to feel the impact. The consequences of each action, each choice, each moment of silence accumulate, weigh, and echo. You realize, perhaps for the first time, that his mind wasn't an open book. It was a labyrinth, and each scribble is a half-open door, a key that gives us only a fraction of what truly existed. Each attempt at understanding increases the tension, heightens the need to decipher, to delve deeper. It's the transformation of observer into confidant, of curious into silent accomplice. And as you absorb this, the feeling of psychological voyeurism grows. It's not just fascination with the forbidden. It's empathy, it's safe fear, it's the certainty that something will yet be revealed, and that every minute spent paying attention will have its reward. On paper, a few lines suggest impulsive decisions, small hidden truths about his character, fragments of regret, perhaps even red herrings. A mix calculated to confuse, to test the observer, to reveal only what the observer deserves to perceive so far. The impact of this lies not in clarity, but in the way this incomplete information affects you, how it manipulates your thoughts and feelings, keeping the narrative alive and pulsating. And as you delve deeper into this fragment, into the margins of this paper, something becomes clear. There is much more to be discovered. Every scribble, Every symbol, every pause between words is a silent promise that the hidden truth still awaits. Stay with me until the end. Feel the intensity, the thrill, the mystery that has yet to be revealed. Because the next detail, the next layer, the next decision you see will alter everything that seems certain, will challenge your perception, and perhaps leave a mark you never expected to feel. The paper, the mind, death row, the decisions made, everything intertwines now, forming a mosaic you can't let go of. And while your hands don't touch, your eyes merely absorb, you understand that each fragment carries the weight of an impact that transcends the physical, that stirs the mind, the emotions, the safe voyeurism that only the understanding of a crime not fully revealed can provoke. The story continues, the backstory deepens, and what you're about to perceive will no longer be just observation. It will almost be an extension of your own consciousness, an invitation to delve even deeper into the labyrinth he left behind. And so, the paper ceases to be paper. It becomes a witness. It becomes a messenger. It becomes the first piece in a sequence of revelations that will challenge your every expectation, every assumption, every feeling that you already understand what happened. His name ripples through the city like a whisper that turns into a suppressed scream. On the streets, on social media, in police station corridors and crowded cafes, everyone seems to carry the same silent question: what if it were me? Each account adds layers to the narrative, each online comment or murmur on a TV show a lens that distorts reality, amplifying the emotional impact of what happened in that cell, in that cold corridor. He ceases to be just a man. He becomes a symbol, a mirror of what society fears to face within itself, of the decisions hidden behind justifications, of the truths that refuse to be revealed. Obscure forums begin to throb with theories, improvised connections between known facts and rumors that defy logic. Journalists chase fragments, almost sensational headlines, but still there remains a void that cannot be filled by printed words. The hidden truth refuses to be contained, slipping through curious fingers, whispering on every cell phone screen, every computer screen, reminding us that nothing is as simple as it seems. This is where psychological voyeurism finds its purest form. The entire city, anonymous, becomes a silent accomplice to the impact of a life that ended in fragments. As you watch this, you might wonder, do we truly understand what happened, or are we simply reacting to what's presented to us? Every version of the story, every distorted image that reaches you, carries with it a shadow of what he truly was. And even the official version, the cold, bureaucratic, and carefully edited one, seems incapable of capturing the weight of his decisions, his thoughts in the final seconds before his execution. It's in this space between reality and interpretation that the psychological effect intensifies, as if each viewer were dragged into the cell, feeling the cold concrete floor, the tension in their muscles, the suffocating anxiety of a man who still had unanswered questions. Some believe he was manipulated, others that fate was inevitable. Some see justice, others tragedy. But everyone feels the impact, and that's what keeps the narrative alive, what transforms the story into a collective experience. The city breathes in unison with the assured fear of understanding, but also with the attraction of the forbidden, of the secret that should never be revealed. With each divergent account, with each shared detail, you realize that the truth isn't unique. It fragments, bends, transforms, and understanding it becomes almost an exercise in extreme empathy, an exploration of one's own morality. And as the voices multiply, there's a silent, almost hypnotic effect. You begin to anticipate the next detail, the next clue. His mind, even after death, continues to send subtle signals, to challenge perceptions, to provoke the discomfort necessary for you to fully engage. The networks and the streets become a makeshift stage, the backstage of a mind that still dominates the narrative, shaping feelings and doubts. Every comment, every theory you read, every conversation you overhear, is an extension of the psychological impact that began in that cell. You slowly realize that it's not just curiosity, it's reflection. It's confronting limits we dare not touch in everyday life. It's the awareness that decisions, actions, and unresolved thoughts can reverberate in unexpected ways, creating invisible transformations, emotional side effects, echoes that traverse time and space. And in the midst of this chaos, you are simultaneously an observer and a participant, feeling the effect of every spoken word, every interpretation, every silent suspicion. And it is precisely at this point that the story expands from the inside out, from the cell to the collective. From the mind of a convict to the minds of all who come near it. From crumpled paper to forums, from incomplete words to headlines, each fragment is amplified by the human impact it provokes. Future revelations are already intertwined here, waiting for you to perceive the depth of what has not yet been revealed. The weight of the past isn't something that reveals itself all at once. It creeps in slowly, like a shadow lengthening at dusk, touching every decision, every choice, every thought that shaped his mind. A child too young to understand the world, but big enough to feel the silent tension that ran between cold walls and suspicious gazes. Those memories don't disappear. They hide, wait, accumulate in dark corners of the mind, shaping the perception of right and wrong. Every neighbor, every teacher, every friend who crossed his path carries fragments of the same puzzle that no one has dared to piece together until now. And when you look at him, seconds before the inevitable, you understand that he's not just a man facing death. He's a body carrying decades of neglect, unresolved trauma, small signs that now seem like prophecies of something everyone tried to ignore. Transformation doesn't happen overnight. It's slow, imperceptible, almost imperceptible to those observing from the outside, but devastating to those within. Mentality builds in layers, each decision made becoming a brick in the construction of a hidden truth. Every act, every omission, every whisper of self-doubt transforms into an impact, reverberating in your conscience and that of those around you. This is when you realize, crime doesn't begin in the final act. It begins much earlier, in small deviations, in emotional negligence, in what society ignores because it prefers to turn a blind eye. And the mind of the condemned, even now before the end, still operates in this territory, oscillating between regret, justification, and calculation. It's fascinating and terrifying to observe. Stories from neighbors emerge slowly, almost like whispers interrupted by time. It's always been different, some say, and you sense the ambiguity of that phrase. Different from what? Different from everyone? Different from what society expects of a child? The line between alertness and ignorance dissolves, leaving only the feeling that something inevitable was brewing, invisible to everyone. Small, everyday acts of violence, neglect, emotional abandonment. Every detail connects in an almost conspiratorial way, as if life itself were conspiring to make that final moment so unexpected and devastating possible. The schools, the parks, the neighboring houses, the silent hallways of childhood. Each space bears a mark, an invisible scar, a memory he carries with him. You realize that memory functions like a frame that is never fully seen, but that directs every present gesture, every moral decision, every psychological deviation. And you, a silent observer, feel the weight of this story on your shoulders, as if you were walking inside his mind, feeling the impulses, the frustration, the isolation he experienced without ever having a voice to demand understanding. And the viewer's pain grows because they recognize something of themselves in this process. A fascination with the forbidden, with what shouldn't be known, but which arouses irresistible curiosity. The human mind always seeks explanations, patterns, causality. But here there are no easy answers. Only fragments, signals that need to be connected, pieces of an emotional puzzle that defies comprehension. Every childhood memory, every trauma, every comment from someone who crossed your path becomes a clue to a truth that refuses to be complete. And it is precisely this incompleteness that creates tension, that holds attention, that transforms psychological voyeurism into an intimate experience. You're not just watching, you're inside, feeling, anticipating, questioning. Between each memory, false clues emerge, small ambiguities that make you doubt what you're seeing. A childish gesture that might have been harmless, a forgotten word that now sounds like a warning. The line between reality and interpretation becomes blurred, as if the condemned man's own mind is playing a game with you, inviting you to question not only the story, but your very perception of what is right, what is inevitable. Every physical fragment that appears later, every piece of paper, every mark on the wall, is not just evidence. It is a reminder that life constructs its own labyrinth of decisions and consequences, and that psychological impact knows no boundaries. And so, the narrative expands, not just the mind of one man, but the story of everyone around him, of everyone who touches even superficially this hidden truth. Revelations emerge in layers, each one denser, more hypnotic, more painful. Behind the scenes of what seemed bureaucratic now reveals itself charged with emotion and human choices, with silent regrets, with secrets that insist on surfacing. And even as you think you've understood something, a new layer appears, a new doubt, a new fragment that changes your perception of what is real. Memories mingle with rumors, with contradictory accounts, and you realize that the weight of the past isn't limited to the condemned. It spreads, permeates society, touching you subtly, almost imperceptibly, yet profoundly. Every decision, every negligence, every lost glance that went unnoticed becomes an impact, reverberating through time, piercing the minds of those who observe, creating an invisible web of guilt, empathy, and fascination with what should not be revealed. And as these shadows intertwine, you instinctively sense that there is still more to be unraveled. The past doesn't end, it merely transforms, revealing fragments that defy understanding, and leaving questions that insist on remaining unanswered, ready to lead you to the next layer of this intense and unsettling story. The darkness deepens almost organically, as if every shadow in his mind has spread to touch the reality of the observer. Every extreme theory born in forums, in anonymous comments, in the yellowed pages of old newspapers, carries a silent tension, a feeling that what you think you understand is never enough. Secret societies, dark pacts, invisible influences, everything seems to converge around a core that no one dares to name, but that everyone feels. His death, so formal, so definitive in its legal rituals, is no longer the end. It is a point of intersection, a fragment of something greater, a piece on a board that extends beyond what any mind can encompass. And you realize, even without wanting to, that looking at him is looking at the reflection of every secret society keeps hidden, every decision buried with a cold smile, every choice that, in silence, reverberates brutally. As the audience constructs its own images of what happened, you sense the ambiguity creeping in. A true clue might be a distraction, a false detail, an unexpected revelation. The condemned man's gaze, captured in old photographs and belated accounts, reveals more than words could. An unsettling calm, a subtle disdain, perhaps too much understanding, perhaps too much regret. Every fragment of his past, every testimony from neighbors, every document found in the prison archives, blends with hearsay and rumor, creating a narrative that refuses to resolve itself. The human mind clings to patterns, but here they crumble before an elusive truth, hidden in the details and gaps, in the silences between sentences and forgotten gestures. And yet, you feel a visceral need to understand. To put the pieces of the puzzle together, even if incomplete, even if painful. Empathy mingles with psychological voyeurism. You observe, feel, imagine, but remain safe. It's a delicate dance between fascination and fear. Every childhood story, every hidden trauma, every step that led you to this final point, is revealed in layers, as if you were unfolding an old letter someone left for you, full of scribbles, stains, incomplete words, but enough to send shivers down your spine. The narrative expands to touch on other elements. Small decisions that accumulate, mindsets shaped by fear and rejection, silent transformations no one witnessed. Every fragment of what he experienced, every detail of what official records attempt to reduce to statistics, emerges with emotional intensity, impacting not only your perception of the case, but your perception of how the world treats those who cross invisible boundaries. You feel the tension growing, the uncertainty mounting, the safe fear transforming into almost obsessive fascination. Meanwhile, the first contradictions emerge. Accounts that don't add up, documents that appear to have been manipulated, witnesses who contradict each other. All of this creates a sense that the truth is fragmented, hidden, playing hide and seek with those trying to find it. Each new layer of information brings with it more questions than answers. The psychological impact of the convicted man, the effects of his decisions, the density of his memories, all seem to conspire to make you feel trapped inside the labyrinth of your mind, able to feel regret, guilt, and frustration but unable to emerge with certainty on the other side. And among these fragments, subtle signs of something larger appear. Patterns in the accounts, nearly impossible coincidences, symbols that recur in the papers found on the cell walls in conversations with former colleagues. It's as if each piece of information were a piece of a secret architecture, an invisible construction that can only be partially perceived, with the constant risk of being deceived by one's own mind. The mystery becomes almost tangible, breathing in the air, enveloping each testimony, each document, each memory, like a dense fog you feel on your face but can't quite penetrate. And this is where the controversy arises. Some believe it's all manipulation, a staged cover-up for greater crimes. Others see the hand of forces that will never be named, cruelly and coldly engineering destinies. You realize, almost instinctively, that your perspective on this story is not neutral. It's shaped by fear and fascination, by the insatiable curiosity to understand the forbidden, by the pain of imagining what could have been different, by the regret projected onto every choice he made. And yet, no answer is definitive. Every fragment revealed, every testimony presented, every extreme theory discussed on the streets and in forums, only deepens the abyss. As you feel this density, you realize that the condemned man's mind, seconds before his execution, is still operating in this labyrinth. Regret, rationalization, memories of trauma, attempts to justify decisions that cannot be undone. The tension is almost palpable. You feel as if you are side by side with him, experiencing the same anxiety, the same silent desperation, but unable to intervene. Every movement of his body, every contraction of his breath, every gaze lost in the void, transforms into psychological information that affects your own perception of morality, guilt, and destiny. And then, amidst this whirlwind of fragments, you begin to notice that nothing is linear. Everything blends together, past and present, reality and interpretation, truth and illusion. Each clue can be the key or a distraction. Each fragment of the past seems to conspire with the present to create an impact that resonates beyond the individual. You feel like you're on the edge of something profound, a revelation that hasn't yet been revealed, a layer of hidden truth that will only reveal itself if you remain attentive, if you delve deeper without hesitation, remaining aware of the emotional and psychological density that permeates every detail. The story spirals rather than a straight line. Childhood memories reverberate in adult decisions, traumas echo in fateful choices, small signs become symbols, isolated events interconnect in ways no one could have predicted. You realize that his death, though seemingly final, is merely a turning point, an instant that reveals far more than it should. The darkness deepens, and each revelation, each fragment, each clue that emerges, creates new layers of mystery, making it impossible to separate what is real from what is interpretation, leaving you immersed, mesmerized, and emotionally attached to the narrative, ready to continue unraveling the next fragment of this mind and this story that still holds secrets that defy understanding. The final collapse isn't dramatic, it's not cinematic cliches, it's silent, slow, almost invisible. It's the weight of what was left unsaid, of what was hidden, pressing down on the body's present and the official narrative itself. You feel it before you see it, before you hear it. The air inside death row vibrates with unanswered questions, with the doubt that clings to your skin, to your mind. The final sentence, spoken or almost swallowed, resonates more for what it omits than for what it reveals. It is in that moment that every gaze becomes a mirror, reflecting what everyone fears to admit, that truth is never just truth, that justice can be a thin veil over a greater shadow. As you observe every detail, you realize that the execution isn't just physical, it's psychological, a direct impact on everyone who breathes the same air, on everyone who carries the memory of that moment. His mind, seconds before the end, isn't linear. Old memories invade his consciousness. A child who hid tears, decisions that seemed small and harmless, lies that accumulated, whispers no one heard. Everything converges at a point of almost unbearable tension, and you feel the weight of this life dissolving into silence, but the narrative doesn't cease to exist. It multiplies, spreads into fragments, rumors, speculations that no one can prove. The accounts overlap, contradict each other, and you begin to question everything you thought you knew. Guards remember hesitations, reporters notice glances no one else noticed, family members speak of gestures that seem like coded messages. Each fragment is both a clue and a trap for your perception. The viewer becomes an involuntary confidant of unspoken secrets, absorbing tension, unable to separate reality from interpretation. It's impossible not to feel like you're inside that cell, next to that man, feeling the chill of the truth that isn't fully revealed, the guilt that stretches like a shadow over all who witness it. And at that moment, the question arises that resonates louder than any evidence. If you were in his shoes, what would you do? How would you react to the inevitability of the decision, to the psychological impact each choice has on your own soul? It's this reflection that keeps you captivated, that transforms voyeurism into introspection, safe fear into silent fascination. The condemned man's mind is a mosaic of decisions, regrets, justifications, and revelations that he could never organize, but that you somehow begin to piece together, fragment by fragment. Meanwhile, history comes alive outside death row. Forums, social media, TV shows, old newspapers. Everyone reinterprets every gesture, every word, every silence. Secret societies and obscure pacts mingle with rumors of manipulation and larger conspiracies. His death, though real, ends nothing. It heightens the feeling that there are layers no one dares to fully explore, hidden truths that insinuate themselves between the lines, in the gaps of witnesses' memories, in the forgotten scribbles on crumpled papers. And you realize that there's something in each fragment that simultaneously awakens empathy and repulsion. The humanity of the condemned man, the coldness of the institutions, the relentlessness of time. Every detail of his life, childhood traumas, controversial decisions, the weight of each choice, the silent transformation of his mindset, contributes to a complex web that engages all of us, the viewers, in a space of reflection. It's painful, uncomfortable, but irresistible. You feel that understanding a little of this story is a deeper understanding of limits, morality, justice, and the human mind itself. And at that point, something shifts in the collective perception. The case stops being just about him and becomes about everyone watching, everyone trying to fit together pieces that don't fit. Each new interpretation becomes part of the narrative spiral, creating layers upon layers of suspense, controversy, and mystery. The execution doesn't conclude the story, it merely alters its rhythm, and you feel like you're on the verge of discovering something that until now has only been hinted at in shadows, a detail that could completely change how you perceive the entire narrative. Between these layers, the first physical clues emerge again. Details that seemed insignificant gain meaning, forgotten objects, imperceptible marks, scribbled words that someone tries to decipher. It's in that moment that you understand. The hidden truth is not linear, not total. It reveals itself in fragments, in emotional impacts, in psychological traces left behind. His mind still inhabits every space of the story even after death. And you sense, silently, that something is about to unfold, something that will once again transform the perception of guilt, regret, and mystery, keeping you connected, almost breathing along, with the feeling that every word, every silence, every detail matters more than ever. On death row, in records, in accounts, in the shadows of the past, the line between reality and interpretation blurs. And you begin to understand that the weight of the past, the present, and human decisions is not something that can simply be summed up in a sentence. It spreads, reverberates, impacts, reveals, and conceals simultaneously, leaving a space for you to question, feel, and silently participate in that which no one has dared to name. Each fragment is a piece, each memory a labyrinth, and you realize that there is still something lurking, ready to emerge from the silence, ready to challenge once again what you believe you know. The silence isn't empty. It pulses as if breathing along with you, as if every beat of your own heart were an echo of what hasn't been revealed. There are no definitive answers, only fragments, pieces of reality that refuse to come together. And even though everyone says the case is closed, you sense something that escaped, something hidden between the lines of each record, in every look from those present. Every guard's account, every reporter's comment, every family member's gesture becomes a vague clue, a shadow that floats in the viewer's memory, whispering that the story isn't over. You begin to realize that his mind, even after his last breath, remains alive in the corridors of doubt. Every thought, every regret, every confession left unsaid becomes a specter within the narrative. It's impossible to separate truth from interpretation, the intention of the gesture from the fear he carried, the guilt that everyone, including you, begins to feel as they try to decipher what really happened. The psychological impact of what happened inside doesn't disappear with the execution. It infiltrates your memories, transforming into unanswered questions, invisible bridges to thoughts you never dared to explore. And then the signs no one noticed before emerge. Subtle marks in the cell, misplaced objects, scratched out words that seem random but carry a pattern that defies logic. Every detail is a provocation that demands your full attention. Each fragment arouses curiosity and discomfort, a sense of safe voyeurism, where you observe without actually touching, but feel every impact, every decision, every emotion that permeated that life. His mind, moments before his execution, was neither clear nor linear. It was labyrinthine, full of daydreams, regrets, fears, memories that intertwined in a spiral of almost unbearable tension. The impact isn't just personal. Outside the hallway, the story unfolds in multiple layers. Conspiracy theories, secret pacts, manipulations that creep into social media, newspapers, and forums. His death ceases to be an end and becomes a catalyst for collective obsession. Each fragment of information spreads like tiny flames in a web of mystery, fueling debate, speculation, and, above all, the desire to understand something that seems intangible. The public now becomes part of this game, involuntarily drawn into a plot that blends reality and interpretation almost imperceptibly. You begin to realize that the weight of his past isn't just his. It's a reflection of our own decisions, our own limits, our own morality. Every childhood trauma, every mistake made, every silence held, every look that found no response, all of this becomes an invitation to introspection. You find yourself asking, what if it were me? How would I deal with this silence? How would I carry the weight of truths I can't share? And in that moment, voyeurism transforms into empathy, curiosity into controlled pain, tension into almost tangible reflection. Even in what appears to be resolved, contradictory fragments emerge. Divergent testimonies, small inconsistencies in official records, clues that challenge chronology, memories that don't align. Each element reinforces that the execution, though final in the physical sense, did not end the emotional and psychological spiral he left behind. Death row becomes a metaphorical place, a mental space that continues to exist for those who dare to approach history, for those who feel the impact of every decision, every regret, every unexplained gesture. And this is where the narrative transforms into a sensory experience. You feel the cold of the cell, the smell of fear, the weight of guilt, the tension of a moment that will never be repeated, but which reverberates in every detail. You realize that the story, though fragmented, is alive. Every word, every silence, every shadow connects to your own imagination, creating a safe space for reflection, yet simultaneously uncomfortable, unsettling, and irresistible. The story's elements intertwine: past, present, rumors, hidden truths, and each acts as a mirror of your own curiosity and fascination with the forbidden. You realize you're inside the condemned man's mind, not as a passive spectator, but as an unwitting confidant of thoughts never meant to be shared, absorbing the psychological weight, the internal transformation, and the complex mindset of a life about to be erased. And at that point, something subtly shifts. You sense that the official conclusion, the records, the public versions, are only the surface. There is something that remains hidden, something that time has not erased, that words have not revealed. A detail that, if uncovered, could reverse everything, transform perceptions, impact how we understand guilt, repentance, and justice. The hidden truth remains intact, almost at our fingertips, but still inaccessible. The doubt is now more intense. Did he die lying, or did he take the truth with him? Every testimony, every physical fragment, every diffuse memory points in different directions. And you realize silently that the story is not finished. It breathes, moves, infiltrates thoughts and memories, transforming into a spiral of mystery that you cannot, and do not want, to abandon. If you've made it this far, sat with me in this silence and these secrets, leave your mark. Write in the comments, "I'm with you until the end." It's a small gesture, but it means you were part of this story, that you felt the weight of what no one dared to tell, that you understand the urgency of not letting the truth escape. Give me a like too, not just for the video but for the connection we built, for the shared understanding, for the sense of justice that hovers between what is said and what was hidden. And if you feel there's still more to discover, something beyond these walls and these fragments, there's a video here that complements this topic, delving even deeper into the behind the scenes of this story. Click and stay with me there. Because the truth is never revealed entirely at once, and each detail you discover is a step in a spiral that only closes when we decide to look closely, without fear, without haste, without distraction.